I have clicked the button.
He has clicked the button.
So the first thing we need to work out is whether or not I can
We
be
are
heard
live, and I
and
can be heard.
he can be heard, because I
Oh,
often
nice. The first thing that came up on my screen was me singing "He has clicked the button."
so there is a lag, and it
Hello, everybody. Hello, Michael.
hi.
How are you, Mikey? You seem a little frazzled.
I've been busy. So yeah, and you're fresh back from the States.
I
Which
am.
is
I'm still
exciting.
slightly jet lagged and sleepy, but it's getting much better.
I notice I'm staring at you completely on another screen, so let me move. Sort of. No, not moving you around that much. Don't want to make
So
you
Mikey
travel
and
sick.
I have met up twice over the past week to do like meals and figure out what we're doing for the next few months and stuff. And every single time we're as sensible as this introduction.
Yeah, pretty much.
Those poor people in the pub. I see Jana. Hello, Jana.
How is everybody? So
And I
yeah,
see a Roderick. Hello, Roderick.
so this is our first meetup of 2022. This is not
Happy
going to
New
be
Year, Michael.
particularly structured because we're ramping up and getting back into stuff now. Jan and I had some great discussions about what parts of the RPG to approach first.
Yep.
We talked a lot about how we're going to handle our main character, how armor's going to go on, how we're going to incorporate that into specific courses.
And
So there's so
traditionally at this
much coming
point,
up.
yeah, totally. Traditionally at this point, like you're doing a year and say looking forward to it, you present a timeline. And we did actually talk about that. And the problem we have with giving a timeline is we can't be accurate because the moment Godot 4 is in a stable enough is released and stable enough to make courses on.
Yeah.
So not when it's an alpha, I would imagine, but when we feel okay, this is now the point where the changes are coming slow enough, we can go live with courses.
Yeah.
Everything we're working on suddenly changes. So
Yes.
it's more, what are we thinking of doing over the next few months? What's our game plan? What's our priority list, I
Yep.
guess?
And of course,
And
once Godot 4 actually comes out and it's ready for everybody to use in the mainstream, then we can move across into that. So we'll have a series of shorter things coming up, whether they're courses themselves or whether they're free stuff for you guys. That would just transpire over the next
whether they're
couple of
free
months.
courses.
Yes, we talked about that as well. That was a lot of fun going through the possibilities.
Yep. So I guess the big thing. That's all. The big thing is going to. Sorry, just channeling my inner elder. I am sleepy. Is the RPG.
Yes.
Michael has been working on the very, very first steps of creating modular weapons in Blender.
Yes.
So just proof of concept, making it work. And at some point soon, he's going to get the assets to a state where he thinks, okay, here, play with these. This is kind of what I'm thinking of. And I'm going to take them into Godot and try some generative code.
Yeah.
And see if I can get something that is workable and can create a rigid body weapon that's something you can drop into the world and bounces around, and a weapon that's a mesh body that has its own weapon script, because weapon is its own class in my prototype, in our prototype. And just how to generate that, how to change the colors, how to change the icons, how it's going to do the UI.
Well, yeah, that was one of the probably the biggest discussion topic we had was how are the weapons going to be represented, both on a UI standpoint. So what's the icon going to look like, especially since we're going to be randomly generating the weapons. So at some point, we've got to put some pieces together, whether they're 2D already baked elements or we take a picture in game of a random element being put together. It's challenging to work out the balance as to which way you could approach it.
So to give you guys some kind of background or some context, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Currently, we're using pre-made icons from a pack I bought.
Yes.
Right, so just placeholder assets. Here's an axe, here's a sword, here's a wand. Great. And I can assign a unique icon to each thing. However, if we are procedurally generating the weapons, and we're thinking at the moment of, for instance, a sword might have a pommel, a hilt, with a guard and a blade. Don't know how many pieces, but that kind of idea.
Yep.
Each can have its own material and possibly a special effect like fire. We can't just use a standardized sword image. Because if you've picked up a sword you really like or a sword you really want to sell, you need to know which one it is. Hello, Gerard. So do we try and ascribe each of those pieces to a single transparent image and then create an image in Godot? Do we use a standardized thing and just have the colors changing in Godot? Like there's different ways we need to play with that.
Yes, and ultimately it's what the player of the game is going to understand from it, because you can come up with some very perhaps convoluted scheme of theming your weapons, but at the end of the day it will come back to the fact that you need to have something that the player understands. We talked about perhaps we can have kind of an overlay on the icon itself, and then we thought, well, how about as in the standard colors, grey for uncommon, and then the different types of loot, the green, the orange, the blue, and the gold, or the purple, whatever it happens to be, because that's kind of a trope within any RPG where you've got more capable weaponry. And then we thought, well, how about making it a little bit simpler than that, because we could actually make each individual material be its rarity, be its ability. So whether that be obsidian being the strongest weapon, or glass being the strongest weapon, ironically.
We had a little talk about that. Mikey was like, can you have a glass weapon? It's like, well, obsidian blades are very sharp.
Yeah, okay. So we can very easily distinguish the rarity of a weapon or the power of a weapon by its material it's made with, and that just be the law of the game, so to speak.
Yep, I've had a cat.
Where's the other one?
Asleep on my bed.
This is mine now.
All right, you can get behind me. I'm being moved. So yeah, it's right now we're at the stage of we're going to have to go back and forth a few times and try different things. I mean, we understand the basics of, different ways we could generate it and put in rarity weightings and all the rest of it. But it's more, how is it actually going to generate in game? How is it going to generate in game and still work with a save game? Because if you want to save a weapon between runs, we need a way of tracking that.
Yeah.
How are we going to present it to the player, and how are we going to do this in a way that is easy to pick up? Like, we want this to be a good education journey. Like, if we're doing an indie game, there's all kinds of things we could do on our side, but
yeah, very much so. So we've got the beginning parts working, the random generation in Blender, not of the whole weapon, but of the assembly of the parts. So I can send over. I've got the code, type in 50 weapons, press play, and it will randomly put things together. And you will get some duplicates because that's the nature of being random. So we got that part of it done. But obviously there comes a point where Yan can't curate 500 weapons being put in. We're going to have to switch to the procedural generation also being done in Godot.
Well, it also makes a huge difference with file sizes.
Yes.
Because if I'm trying to load and pass I say giant, but let's say 500 weapons, right? And I'm going to load those up each time. That's a drastically different proposition to load up 5 hilts, 5 pommels, 5 blades. And then
it's 15, 20 meshes rather than
and create
500.
how many we need when we need them.
Yeah, big difference there. So there are reasons, much like the way that we've taken the majority of the case, there won't be any textures in the game. So whilst I'll be showing people how to UV unwrap, that's not actually what we'll be doing in our game, because by making the materials a property that we can change, then we can color things in differently very quickly. Now, you could also use a texture atlas for that. There's lots of different approaches for the same outcome, essentially, visually the same outcome. But we want to make sure if we're being random, we've got finer control over that. So we understand things like
not random, procedural.
Procedural,
because those are not the same thing.
True. And we end up in a position where, well, our weaponry, for instance, we want to be able to change out the materials. And there'll be individual objects anyway, so they're not going to be able to have, unless you're rebaking an entire material the second time round, which would be too much. You imagine the loading screen. In fact, you've probably seen it in some procedural games on the loading screen where it is loading up specific parts or generating weaponry.
I mean, the one that
etc.
I always remember is loading up No Man's Sky, like that initial load every time you play. When you first, you load the game, it's fine. You start your game where you load the actual save,
Yep.
and it can take ages of just flying through that very beautiful starscape. And that's because it has to bring in so many generated
Yeah.
worlds and weapons and creatures. And
Oh, a great one. Couple of well, it must have been a couple of months ago, but I remember it vividly. I went into customize on a Factorio map, and it was as you change the sliders, you could it then reset the world, made the world, and then it would put in things like water and everything afterwards. It was very interesting from the standpoint of game development how they and in what order they applied the changes.
do you know what game has that functionality and then quietly never mentioned it again? Arc. You can generate procedural maps in Arc. They're huge. They're usually ugly and unplayable, and they're really slow to load. Like just the first generation of it.
This is why they didn't carry on.
Yeah. Because it just wasn't as much fun as a curated map. Like in that case, the big open world map with like little ruins and expertise you can come up and caves is just more interesting than weird bumpy mountains.
Yeah, well, we went through it with the dungeon generator. We ended up in a position where we could generate like a 20 by 20, but that would take 15 minutes to do. Then we just changed the order of the way that it was building, and you managed to get that down to maybe 45 seconds, which is suddenly a playable thing. You know, waiting 45 seconds for something to generate, that's fine.
So yeah, there's a lot we're going to play with, and I think our first priority this year, not including mini courses and things on YouTube, is going to be getting that procedural weapon and armor generation working. Although the armor generation is probably have to wait for the next bit I want to talk about, which is the new characters.
Yes.
That was a.
Oh, it was the segue for me, was it? So some of you will know Paul. He's got the Grease Pencil course with us, and he will be doing some concept art courses. It depends how we structure it. We're still going through the pedagogy at the moment, and and so we're going to have some concept character art. It's going to be in Critter 5 or Critter. I've heard some people call it Critter. I'm going to call it Critter. I
already have this argument with people with Godot. I'm not getting involved. Like, that is not my monkey, not my circus.
Yeah, so we met up not last weekend, but the weekend before to go through some stuff, and he's been just fleshing out the beginning of the course. We think it's going to be structured in a couple of parts. So there'll be an introduction that's all about getting Critter set up for concept art, because even though you'll use lots of the same tools, you'll often set up Critter differently depending on what you're trying to create. And we're going to be we decided to use Critter rather than something like Grease Pencil, because really when you start moving things into Grease Pencil, which you can do, that's more of a later stage down the line when you're finishing up your concept art. You've picked one, you want to finalize it, and then it's already in the 3D workspace ready to start modeling from.
Hello, Bakosh.
Hey, long time no see.
I'm actually really excited because I've been wanting us to have something with Critter for a while. I have no idea how to use the program. I've downloaded it repeatedly, looked at it and, oh, this looks really pretty. I wonder how you use it, and then put it away. And I don't really have the same kind of time I had when I taught myself how to use GIMP. I can't just sit there for a week playing with it. So
Critter, my first experience of Critter, I found the symmetry tool, and I went, oh, you can have 2, 4, 6. You could, and I just sat there for about half an hour.
Kaleidoscoping.
Yeah, it was like a giant spirograph. But you know what? That's the thing. If you can take some enjoyment from any package, that's awesome. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to diving back into it and learning some concepting. So the concepting itself, we're going to have character concepting, and we're going to have the 2 parts of the world. So we've got the overworld and the underworld. We're going to have those 2, or dungeon really, it's not really underworld, but yeah, we're going to have those 3 distinct areas as separate focuses. And when discussing with Paul, that's good because they have slightly different focuses and slightly different paths that you would take because they're different things. that you're doing. You would do different concept ideas when you're talking about characters than you would a building in a game.
Yep. Once we have those in place and we can look at them, then the next stage is going to be updating our characters, that's PCs and NPCs, and our armors and our animations. And the reason why we want to do the animations, we can go back to what's involved in the characters and the armors, is right now we're using Mixamo, which is fantastic. You download the animation you want, you can use it in your game, you can use it in your prototype. What you can't do is give out that animation as a file or in any way that it can be downloaded and extracted. So we can't give you that animation. You can go download it, but we can't give it to you. And that presents kind of a awkward hurdle.
Yeah.
Especially if those animations ever get taken down or updated or whatever. So the idea is poor old Michael has to make them.
I've been looking forward to this. Yeah, we were discussing whether to go into the 12 principles of animation and how deep to take a potential character's course, because or an animation course rather than the characters themselves, because the basic path that you would follow, the typical path that you would follow would be you'd do some prototyping, which could be concepting. You'd pick the one that you liked and you'd start modeling it. And that could be through sculpting, it can be through box modeling. It really doesn't matter how you get there as long as you get to the end point. Quick one on the two. I personally prefer a bit of box modeling whilst using the sculpt tool to manipulate the underlying mesh, because then you can pretty much set up your topology nice and early. Whereas if you sculpt, you have to retopologize later. Two sides, same coin. It really doesn't matter. And then you go, you might go into the process of UV unwrapping, etc., and texturing. We don't need to worry about that in our course, and that saved us a big step, and that is a big step. Seams on characters can be a nightmare. And then we'll talk about like the armor and clothing and things like that on there. But after you've done that, the next thing you need to do is rig your character. And Blender comes with an auto rigging bit of software, and we'll be using what comes with the package. I think that's a wonderful tool that's built in, Rigify, I believe it's called. And of course, we'll also learn about how to do it yourself manually, because it'll be silly not being able to adjust what's already there. But we're only going to use basic bones as well. We will have the hands closing like mittens.
Yeah, we don't need all the fingers with multiple joints and the eyeballs.
And again, what we did discover is that adds a ton of animation data that's just not necessary. And really bogs down the file sizes as well. So we do want to keep that as small as possible. Once you've rigged something, then it's onto the animation, and that's where you can have lots of fun.
Yep. And it also led to a conversation about retargeting. Retargeting is where you've got an animation and you've got it on a rig, but you want to use it on a different size rig, or some of the bits of size of a rig are different size. So what retargeting allows you to do is say, okay, whenever you're moving this hand, just multiply all of the distance, all of the coordinates by this value.
Yeah.
Right? There is no tool built into Godot that'll do that. There is somebody who has a plugin for Godot 3, which we haven't really looked at. And you could, in theory, do this manually. All of which I'm not a big fan of for a course like this.
Yeah.
Like if we're asking you to follow along the course and we're following along on this plugin that we haven't used, that feels like a point of frustration potentially. And it may be a fantastic plugin. It may not be supported anymore. I have no idea.
Yes.
So
that's
the
one
decision
of the
we've
biggest things with
taken,
plugins.
right. So the decision we've taken is that all characters, unless there's a good reason otherwise, have the same rig. They're the same size. Just like now with the skeletons in Aria, they are the same size.
Yeah.
Now, we could probably play a little bit with that, but we can't go too much because of the way the weighting works.
You very quickly end up with your model distorting and stretching in places it could stretch.
Now, if we end up with something like a bat, for example, that has completely different animations, then that's fine. But what we don't want to do is have to recreate the key animations for every type of character. We want to have our animations and plug them in. The other side of that is it means all characters can use all animations. It doesn't mean they will use all animations. You might not want your NPCs rolling, or only some NPCs can roll, or maybe skeletons can do things that players can't. But there's nothing to stop you as the game designer just going in and say, okay, put in, I don't know, reanimate on the player.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way of approaching it, because it's As a small team, us and most of you when you're creating a game, it's useful to know not necessarily a bad shortcut, but ways of being efficient with your time. How can you reuse model assets in a way that doesn't look like you've reused them?
And
Animations.
what are the advantages and disadvantages of doing
Yeah.
it this way?
Yeah.
Like our way is we can't have characters slightly different sizes.
Yeah.
You know, we can't have a player that's a half a meter taller than another. We can't have a goblin that's half a meter shorter than the skeleton. They're the same size, unless we go through and recreate everything.
Yeah. I mean, you can in Blender do some retargeting, so that is one option that we discussed approaching. But there comes a point at which the gait of a character changes significantly. So let's take humanoid. You can use the same rig, and you can have height differences with like them having a helmet on or flapping their arms like a bat. Yeah, I'd love to see this guy. And yeah, so all the humanoids.
Can we have
they
Bob
will
with little wings?
Oh yes, yeah, that would all. That'd be close to the skull in Doom that comes at you. So yeah, humanoid characters. I mean, if they walked in the way that a big ogre would walk, it would look odd. And the same's true with, let's say, an imp. An imp's a small thing, isn't it? I don't know, or a goblin or something along those lines. In which case, you would have to have a specific animation for those characters. So. Some might coin it laziness. It's really about efficiency. I mean, once you've learned how to rig and animate a particular humanoid character, you just repeat the process with another one. And, you know, that'll be the sort of thing that's an extended challenge as part of the character.
I mean, the other side of that is if we've walked you through how to do that and you decide, actually, I want to retarget or I want to have different sizes and all the rest of it, you have the knowledge to do that. And if we were an indie game, that would be an ongoing discussion. Do we want all characters to do this? In the same way that with the meshes, we're planning on having male and female playable characters, right? Just it's a roguelike, so you're going to have limited choice of what you're playing each run.
Yeah.
But, you know, here's a male, here's a female. Do we go the very stylized route that, for instance, Chibi go, where everyone has the same body and all the differences are in the head? Or do we have different mesh parts for male and female, and then the armors have to respect that?
Yes, that's probably the biggest thing there, that the fact that having male and female characters has the potential of doubling your workload.
And it's not a case that I think one of these is right.
Oh, no.
It reminds me of something I used to teach my technical theatre students. The wrong decision is the one you haven't made. Like, this is one where you have to make a decision and know why you're doing it, and just that's the style I'm going for, and double down on it, as opposed to like, oh, I'm not doing that because that's wrong.
Yeah, and this ultimately, if you were developing a game, you would typically have a lot of this nice and early on, or I'd recommend that you have it early on anyway, in your game design document. You'd have these as stipulations. So if you wanted to hire an artist to do some work along with you, then they know what they're doing. So you don't have that backwards and forwards, which ends up costing everybody a lot of time and money usually.
And one more thing we should talk about with characters that we discussed at length is we have modular armor unlocked.
Yes.
And we did think maybe armor is just a complete swap out of the midriff, of the middle of the body, and the lower body and the head.
Like, very well could be, yep.
But then we realized if we have modular armor, that's not going to work. Because we're going to have to weight the modular pieces anyway. So at that point, we just have to weight the whole piece of armor, and then we can generate it at runtime or in Blender, like whichever one we decide.
And of course, this also has another knock-on effect of how the asset packs are handled. So taking armor, for example, with modular armor, it basically means you can build up the kit of armor from, let's say, a shoulder pad, and that's it. That could be what your character spawns in with, or they could spawn in with any number of permutations of it. But the moment you start doing that and it's animated, it's only animated within the characters that we create, which is great for you guys. You download that specific pack and you get the animated armor. But we'll also be doing the unanimated armor for anybody wanting to use that on other characters.
And they will have to bring it into Blender and you know, attach it to their rig and do the thing. But if you want this asset pack, but you want to use your own character, that's how you would do it. And of course, if you followed the course, then you will have an inkling of how to do that. I don't have an inkling on how to do that. I mean, I know the fundamentals. I don't know where the buttons are. Um,
Beep, boop,
so
beep.
you should, if you're going to do that, you should follow that course. So we've talked about modular weapons,
Yep.
which is the first bit that I'm going to have to work on because it's the first major system or the next major system that I haven't looked at.
Yes.
We've talked about new characters, new animations, and modular armor. I feel like we should talk a little bit about expectations of how long, well, not how long it's going to take, but the order, because until we have the new characters and animations, I can't, in good faith, start recording on the Godot stuff because I
Yeah,
want those assets
definitely.
in place. We learned this with Godot Getaway, where the Blender course was done after the Godot course, which meant that the assets in the Blender course were just much better because
Yeah.
Mikey had more time to make them. So what I'd like to do is get at least those basic. Well, we've already got Dungeon Pack, which we can extend. We've got some props, which we can extend. But I'd like to get those characters and those animations, those new weapons in, at least the beginnings of the new weapons, so that when we start, here's a character, let's make it move, let's code in the animations. It's already in that spot, so we don't have to
Yeah.
go in later and just re-record everything or get rid of everything.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's several ways that we can approach, and actually we went over that final stretch goal, which just before Christmas, which is absolutely amazing. So thank you everybody for your
Yeah,
support, and obviously that rejigged things around a little.
it did.
Oh, how are we going to put all that in? And yes, so we're going through the process at the moment of mapping everything out, and as Jan was saying earlier, we will put out a timeline. But it would be a fluid timeline. So, like, once Godot 4 is available, this is the rough timeline from there, and then we can narrow things down as we can when we can.
Yep. In the meantime, my plan is I need to track down some missing footage on some of the courses, which is annoying. So I'm going to probably have to re-record those, but that's fine. I want to get to Canaban as a course made. That's another one of these 3-4 hour courses of making a bubble clone that some of you have seen. We should do some little peeking at Godot 4 at the moment. Like I need to get the nightly build and take a look at what's going on.
Yes.
And where things like the rendering bugs I was getting on particles are. Like, I don't know if it's just my machine, I don't know if everyone's getting it. But that feels like a thing we should be playing with.
I don't know what that means. I think that might be spam.
It looks like it could be. Because Jano had the same thing up there.
Yay, we're big enough to get spammed.
Meanwhile, we played some games. Mikey, what have you been playing?
I've actually managed to play some games over Christmas and a little bit of the beginning of the new year. So I've got I bought Half-Life Alyx. I cleared a space in my office, so I've got space. So I'm not actually.
That's the VR one, right?
Yes, I haven't played it yet though. I've been pulled left and right and everywhere. But I had a go with. Is it Crypt of the Necrodancer?
It is Crypt of the Necrodancer.
So, I it feels very much like the remake. This was back on the Xbox 360, the remake of Pac-Man, and we got to, as in the music, it was very engaging, and I love the way within the game as well that you can stand on a speed up button and it gets that was really cool, and I didn't realize the walls were all destructible as well.
Many of them are.
Yeah. Apart from the actual boundaries of the level, but yeah, I was like, yeah, this is awesome, and a couple of hours just disappeared with me going. Dum, 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 dum,
I
dum.
love that game, and I'm so bad at it. So incredibly bad at that game.
I also played Dorf Romantic, so it's a very very chilled.
Oh, the city builder.
Yeah, where you lay down the hexagonal cards and you build up, you join plains and forests and buildings and rivers and trains, train lines together. Yeah, and I got to a point where I was like, yeah, it's
charming, isn't it?
It's an incredibly charming game, and it's also very chilled. I like how relaxed it is. No pressure at all.
I downloaded that in May, just before I moved here, knowing I wouldn't have internet for 3 days.
Mm.
I need something that isn't stressful. So that's what I played.
Mm-hmm. One of the other ones recently is Metro Exodus. I know I'm late to the party on that one,
I mean, I haven't gone to the party.
but yeah, it's an interesting game. I'm definitely into it at the moment, and I've got the difficulty cranked up a little. But yeah, the lighting and everything and the atmosphere. I've got an RTX card, so I can have the better lighting. It really, really is an atmospheric game. I'm not quite.
Yeah.
I know that there's a nuclear winter, etc., and so these beasts have appeared. I'm like, it's science fantasy. It's fine. But yeah, that's been a lot of fun. And arrived through the post today is The Last of Us 2. I've been looking forward to it
Arrived through the post.
Yeah.
Have you time traveled here from 1996?
Yes, it says
You get
it's.
physical copies of games?
I do for the PS4. I'm not. I'm going to buy a game that costs 20 quid and I can sell it in 2 years for 15
That's
quid. Yeah, yeah. So I got The Last of Us 2, and I'm really looking forward to playing that. I loved The Last of Us 1. So, although it was quite funny, I put in the disc, and the PlayStation started downloading a 10 gig update. I was like, well, at least it's downloading the 10 gig update whilst it installs the game, rather than doing one after the other. But I just put it in, walked off. But it takes a while to install off of a Blu-ray disc.
I haven't played a
Hey,
PlayStation
Melicon.
in a while, but the last time I played it was just after PS4 came out. I got so annoyed with buying a game and then having to sit there and waiting for it to patch for 20 minutes.
That was a
And I
real
understand.
issue. Yeah.
Oh, the worst one is when you download the game and then have to patch it for 20 minutes. Like, just why? I mean, I understand why, but it was still annoying. What have I been playing? When I was in the States, I was playing a lot of Ark because, of course, I was. Actually, get some blue thylacoleo, which I know you're excited about. Hitman 3.
Sorry,
finally
have you
came
seen
to
the
Steam.
doctor about that? What's blue thylacoleo?
I've got an appointment with the doctor tomorrow. A thylacoleo is a marsupial cat bear.
Yes, Jan.
Yeah. Hitman 3 finally came out on Steam, and I had some credits on my Steam wallet, and I don't really want to go get Epic Store, and I don't like Uplay. I just want my games in one place. Like, I don't use the GOG thing anymore. And Hitman 3 is very good. I mean, Hitman 2 is excellent, but Hitman 3 really doubles down on the story, and the level design, as always, is excellent.
Yeah, you raise a good point, though, about where your games are. I mean, we started a moment ago with, well, I've got a game that's on a physical disc, and even if the PS4 was never connected to the internet, I'll be able to play that game unpatched. So if there was something game breaking, you'd be screwed.
Broken.
It would be broken. But we're in this position these days. I mean, there are 6 gamers in the house where I am. All of us but one is an active gamer. So I'm in this position where I've got a game, I own a game, but only my account can play it, and my account can only play one game when it comes to Steam. And that really frustrates me, because I'm like, come on. And I thought family sharing would allow the sharing of games, but if they're playing a game and I play a game, it goes, no, and kicks them off. I'm like, but that's not sharing. That's...
No.
It did make me laugh.
I don't know. I'm in favor of things like the Epic Store existing and all the rest of it. I think having options is a good idea. You don't want a monopoly situation, or even an oligarchy situation. But I have enough games in one place that the sort of sunk cost fallacy kicks in, right? I'm like, oh, I've already got them here. I don't want to go anywhere else. And I really don't like having a bunch of IM and game programs running on the computer at the same time.
Yeah.
I just don't want Uplay and Epic and Steam all open in the background. To be honest, these days that's less of an issue because I've disabled automatic starting. I've also stopped playing Ubisoft games after I had such a bad experience with Watch Dogs, the first game, and their launcher. Like, it just irritates me. And now, if it's on Uplay, I think, well, if they take it off Uplay, maybe.
Yeah, I had an issue actually when I was recording, and I'd spent the weekend and everything setting up. Was it Blizzard, Activision, whatever their launcher's called, and then, well, Epic, and then Steam, and then EA, Origin, whatever you want to call it. And I'm sure there's another one there.
I forgot about
Uplay.
Origin.
But at least there's some homogenization happening, like with, well, you can get EA games when you've got Game Pass, which is through Microsoft's store. But hey, look at that! Yes,
I did hear about Microsoft buying Activision
They
for a mere 70 billion USD.
No, it was 68.7 million. They should have paid £300,000 more. Nice.
I was rounding. Now EA own everything. No, Microsoft. No, Microsoft own
a lot.
Is Counter-Strike Activision?
No, that's you're thinking Warzone, aren't you? Call of Duty.
Call of Duty. Thank you.
Or no, it's Vanguard now. That's the thing. I just downloaded this 100 gig game, and they've gone and changed it to a new one. At least it's free to play, so you can jump in if you want to. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Packard's raised a good point. He says he's been sinking more time. He's been singing more time. More time! And then, after he's done that, he's been sinking more time to single-player titles from GOG.
Yes, I've done exactly the same, because then I can install it on... I believe in buying multiple copies of games for multiple people to play concurrently.
Sure.
I'm fine with that. But when I've got a Steam library, for example, I'm like, well... and it's awkward, because even though that's not what the user-end license or the end-user license agreement actually says, because all that is you have a license to play the game and loads of other stuff, but it's far from what it used to be. Or is it? Because that's what you got when you get the disc. You get a license to play it, and there's no guarantee that it will work in the future.
I mean, with discs, you had license to play it, and you could make backups for personal use. Like, you couldn't distribute them and all the rest of it. That was the license agreement. Even then, I think the language might have been written in such a way that you don't own the game. You're purchasing the right to play it. Yeah.
Yeah. And even though that's been the way, we've transitioned as a society from having a physical copy of something. You know, and for a long time, when it was just single-player games, you would be in this position where you could feasibly just play that game whenever. Now we've got this situation where single-player games are requiring online authentication just to play. You're in this really weird scenario where you can have a game that at some point in the future will become unplayable because a service isn't available.
So Hitman's been annoying me recently with this. I've been playing Hitman 3. I was playing Hitman 2 before. Because I knew that January was when the exclusivity on the Epic Store ran out. So I'm going to play Hitman 2 in December, and then Hitman 3 in January when it's available on Steam.
Yeah.
But they have a thing where if you want to record your progress, you must be online. You can still play the game, but you can't unlock anything.
Yeah.
Like, you must be on their servers. And I don't know if it's because everyone has suddenly gone from Steam to Hitman 3, or my internet connection keeps crapping out, or their internet connection keeps crapping out, but halfway through missions, I'll suddenly lose connection, and a little pop-up window comes up and asks me to retry connection again and again and again and again and again. And it kind of takes you out of the mood.
Yes. Yeah, I've had that. I've never... What game was it? It's Destiny. It was Destiny. I bought my PS4, and I think Destiny had just come out, and I think it came with my PS4, actually. Yeah, it did. And so I loaded it up. It took ages to actually download the update again because servers were overloaded. And then you just sit there, and it was like, well, I'm never buying a game on launch day ever again.
As I say, I had the worst time with the launch of Watch Dogs, which I kind of enjoyed. Like, it was very well polished game. I have a lot of issues with the storytelling and some of the character design and some of the basic gameplay, to be honest. I found it very easy. This is the first one. But they had this thing where your game was always online. So, for example, you might get a mission to hack another human player, or another player might get a mission
Yeah.
against you. And it would just randomly happen. But it didn't give you the option not to do this, which meant because their servers were completely hammered, the game would just stop working.
And it would kick you out. It's like,
It would
cheers.
just freeze there until it came back. It's like I don't want to.
Yes. I see where people, Roderick, used to buy original and then play cracked versions. I know people who have used cracked versions in the past just because the DRM didn't work on their computer. And it's a real shame that people have to try and defeat these protection mechanisms. And a lot of the time, it does seem like the protection mechanisms actually stop genuine players.
I mean, DRM. I mean, it's a big topic, but it's one of those things where I completely understand why it's there. Like, I don't want people downloading my content for free and distributing it. Like, it's interfering with my ability to pay rent. And I'm not a major corporation, so for some people that's a big difference. But as a principle, I get it, right?
Yeah.
This is not a free product. It shouldn't be available for
But
free.
some DRM has literally been was it Sony with their rootkit many years ago?
Well, there's been a few very troubling DRMs, but overall, DRM often comes across as so heavy-handed that it feels like it's punishing the player.
Yeah.
Because crackers and hackers get more and more sophisticated.
Oh, it's amazing
So-
what they can do.
So it's kind of an arms race. I mean, I remember back in the day when Elite first came out on the ZX Spectrum, you had to have the manual, and it would ask you to turn to a certain page. Oh no, Elite didn't have the certain page. It had a little
Goblins
plastic
had
thing.
that,
You
turn-
hold it up.
Yeah, I had one where it might have been Lemmings, where you had a wheel and you had to turn the wheel to a certain thing, and it would give you it was Settlers.
But
Settlers
these
as well
days,
is like that.
cracking that is so trivial.
Yeah, once you've got it once, that's it. You've got it. Yeah.
So I don't know. I like the idea of owning a game it is more difficult than we seem to think. Like, I think I own this game, but at any point the servers can go down.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that video I said you should watch on NFTs.
Yeah, I haven't got around to that yet.
Because for those of you who don't know, I'm not an NFT fan. I'm not a cryptocurrency fan. I don't like them. I understand other people do, and there are other opinions on it, and that's a whole debate.
No, you
please don't
mentioned the
at me.
words. Now the
Don't
chat will fill up
at
with
me.
crypto bots.
Don't care. But one of the things they point out is that NFTs are not actually forever, because all you have to do is rename the file on the server.
Mm-hmm.
And then the thing that the token is pointing to is now not what you bought. Like, impermanence is not a thing.
It's difficult in the digital world where a set of ones and zeros and a copy of those ones and zeros are the same thing.
Well, if I may just channel my
It's
aging
fungible.
golf, entropy wins. Like, there's no such thing as permanence. Nothing you own is forever.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
I mean, I've had board games break. Like, it happens.
I can't remember.
I just had to replace my phone because I trod on the last one.
Oops. So there was a game. It was a war game. I can't remember which one it was. Dragon Rising. I can't remember what it was
A
called.
computer game about war with dragons in it.
No, it didn't have
Narrow it
dragons.
down, why don't you?
No. But it was a very realistic simulation. Operation Flashpoint. Dragon Rising.
Dragon something?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is Operation Flashpoint. But yeah,
Operation, the board game, right?
Yeah, it's called Dragon Rising. So Operation Flashpoint, I bought it on Steam. It said you must have these as the minimum requirements. Cool. Of course, being a typical Steam user, I bought it and then tried to play it about 9 months later, and it just doesn't run on modern systems. And so you're in this position where games really sometimes have a place in time, and it does take someone like Good Old Games to come along and
Yeah.
remaster or not remaster as such, but make the game compatible, fix things that were broken. And I
We
know that
have a. Sorry.
I was going to say, going back quickly to the DRM thing, there was a piece of DRM that I think worked in Vista and in 7 would not, so you would lose access to all of those games. And of course, because those games weren't being developed anymore, there was no updates or patches for them. Hence come the
Oh,
cracks.
omnia mutantur nihil interit. Everything changes, nothing is lost.
I got confused then.
We have a request from G Castro. We'd love to see a future tutorial on how to publish our Godot games to consoles. If I recall correctly, and this is not my field of expertise, console you can run Godot on consoles, but the console kits require an NDA, so you can't make a tutorial about them.
That is pretty much in a nutshell. I know that's definitely the case with Sony.
As far as I'm aware, like if you get the Sony kit to make things on PlayStation, you can absolutely publish on Godot.
Yep.
You're going to be back and forth a few times. It's going to be difficult because there's no tutorials for it, but you have to sign an NDA, which means you can't talk about the process to other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that'll be the same with Microsoft, and it's Nintendo are ever so secretive. I would not be surprised if it was also part of them.
As far as I'm aware, and I could be wrong, and it could have changed.
The last time we
unless you
looked
want
at it,
to
it was definitely a gated community. It was just something we could not do without breaching.
Unless, of course, you want to use that open source Linux console, Ouija, what was it called? That just did not do well.
Steam OS is coming out soon on the. Well, I think you can actually download.
Steam OS has been out for a decade.
I was going to say Steam OS is actually, but with the not the Switch, what's it called? The Steam Deck coming out later this year.
The little
the handheld
tabletop paddle. Yeah.
That's going to be really, really interesting. How that pushes Linux forward within the gaming community.
I have to say, I am so impressed with Steam Proton. Like
compatibility.
Of all the games I've tried, one doesn't run. Like Ark works better than it did on PC. You know, it's. I downloaded Hitman 3, couldn't find it on Proton DB. Thought, well, I'll try it. Like I've got the credit, I'll try it. Flawless.
Yeah.
Like we've come so far in emulation. I guess it's not really emulation, is it?
Because Wine is not an emulator.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's really coming on, and I mean I've run Linux for a couple of years solid. I did Unreal, and Blender was significantly faster when it came to rendering. You know, a good 20 to 30% faster on average for rendering out scenes. So there was definitely a place for it. It fell over for me. I think it was something like Apex Legends came out, and I wanted to play it. At that point, I was like, well, there's no way of doing it. And I believe there is still no way of doing it at the moment. So I was like, yes, got to change over.
Yeah. I don't think there's going to be... Well, I don't think 2022 is... 2022, this year, is the year that Windows suddenly loses its dominant market position. But Linux has come a long way. I am not somebody who evangelizes Linux and says everyone should be on it. I've had a really good time on it. I'm really enjoying Pop OS. I was not enjoying Windows. Your mileage may vary. If you're happy on Windows or on Mac or on Acorn or Oracle, I don't care. ZX Spectrum, you be you. If you're happy, use that.
Yeah, I've always looked at... that's kind of what I used to do before I started teaching. I fix computers for a living. That's the shorthand version of it. And there would be all this backwards and forwards, you know, usually between Mac and Windows users. It's like, it's a tool. Do you like the tool you're using? Some people like, let's say, a Mac. Let's use the example here.
Yeah.
Because they like how it looks. They like how it feels. It likes how that it makes them feel.
And I'm somebody who has
get that.
always disliked using a Mac. Like, I don't like the interface. I don't like the design philosophy. But they're not bad. They just don't fit me.
I mean,
I'm not...
the new ones and their video editing capabilities, I was very tempted after that they brought these new GPUs out, which are far more powerful than ones of old, but they actually don't hold a candle to any of the proper dedicated GPUs you can get in other laptops. But what they do have is the battery power when it comes to rendering out video, because part of that GPU actually has the
look,
decoding and encoding for H.264, H.265. So suddenly you can render out in Resolve and do video editing and have, like, I don't know, 8 hours battery life. If I try and do that on my laptop, I can edit about one video and then the battery says, you should probably go and find a socket and plug in. I don't want to.
Yep. So there's been a conversation between Castro and Pacost that I'm going to address real quick because it's not going to show up in future things in the video.
Yeah.
If I was a game my kids could play, I'd have to make it for PC only. How about Raspberry Pi? I don't have a Raspberry Pi, but if I recall correctly, you can export to a Raspberry Pi.
I've got 6.
Pacost says the 4 works better.
The Pi
Arch 64.
I mean, the Pi 4 is quite old now, and I tried to run Blender on the Pi. Older versions work, but the Pi's system on a chip and the GPU that it uses, it doesn't support OpenGL past a certain number. I can't remember which one it is, but it meant that Blender wouldn't run, which was a real shame because I'd have loved to run Blender on a Pi cluster just for the lols.
Just so you could say who ate all the pies.
But you can definitely run games on a Pi because I've got one running old arcade games.
There are tutorials out there for how to make a handheld console out of Pi. Not out of Pi, out of Raspberry Pis. I so want to do a Pi tutorial with you where we bake a Raspberry Pi and then we just start like molding it into a handheld console.
And then go, nom, 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 nom.
That's April. Sort it out. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those tools I've always wanted to play with, but never really got around to.
So I'm fed up. I've got Nest cams at home, and I'm absolutely fed up with their performance. So I bought a load of I think they're called Pi 1s. They're just a board, and then you can plug a camera unit into them, and there you go. You've got basically a Nest cam. Yeah. Okay, it's not quite as good. But I also grabbed a couple ones running a NAS in the house, which unfortunately now the NAS is quite full, is not fast enough to edit video off of. But yeah, they're incredibly useful little devices that can do so much.
Yeah, it's a little computer you can build.
Yeah. I love mine. I think they're awesome. Oh, and I've got the one in the living room that is a gaming console, essentially.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, you can run Blender 2.79, I believe. Yeah.
So we are running closer to the hour. We've already had some questions about consoles, which is interesting. It is something I would like to see more tutorials on. I don't think I am currently qualified on it. I'd have to do some research. I don't know that it's actually feasible to do because of the NDAs.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, interpretive dusters and jingles?
Well, I think what we could do at some point in the future is when we actually have the time availability to do such a thing, is perhaps even go through the process of publishing on PlayStation or Xbox. Godot Getaway on Xbox, and then obviously with the NDAs etc. you probably can't tell anybody specifically what to do, but we'd be in a much better position for that task.
Well, if we can't make tutorials, to what end?
Even though you can't tell someone specific.
If we're making an indie game,
yeah. Oh, that's what I mean. If we ever develop an indie game.
Yeah.
And then even though we couldn't tell everybody the specifics, you could at least do an overview of the process. We should and
pay
again,
them money.
Yeah, probably pay them lots of money and publish. Although I believe Microsoft has a unified system for publishing on Xbox and Windows now, as long as you're part of the Windows
use the
Store.
Microsoft Store. But
yeah,
Again, I don't like using that. Like the only thing I ever used it for was Sea of Thieves, and then that came out on Steam, so I didn't have to.
I bought
Oh
it
no,
on
I used it
Steam
for
and then it came
Fable.
out on Game Pass. I was very annoyed.
Um, what I was going to say.
It
It's gone.
happens. It happens.
It does. It's gone. Forever and ever. Yeah, so does anyone else have any, or even to say people, have any questions, thoughts, things they want to see us do, games they want us to play,
Whilst you got us,
large bags of money they want to give us? It's worth a shot.
swag bag.
Michael came and picked me up a couple of nights back. We're going out for dinner. And it's cold, so I'm outside. I'm wearing a sweater, which is a hoodie. I've got my hood up, and I'm wearing black and black and black. Michael just pulls up next to me. He's like, "We look so dodgy."
Then you started running at the car. I'm like, get it into gear. Go, go, go.
I was expecting to have a little stripe bag. I'm looking forward to Payday 3. I'm interested to see what they do with it. Apparently, they're going with an open world feel in New York.
Ooh. As long as I can use rocket launchers on stealth missions, I'm fine.
Well, put the silencer on the rocket launcher. Thought you'd enjoy that.
That's a confetti cannon.
It's when you fire marshmallows.
Yes, it's a foam cannon. It goes in and expands.
We were actually talking about that because I watched a video on Worst MMO Ever on YouTube, and he was looking at Secret World Legends, and he was talking about how the combat felt really floaty, which is something I'd noticed, but I couldn't figure out why. And he pointed out, using the shotgun, that the things you're shooting at don't react to it. There's no impact, they're not slowed down, they're not pushed, there's no... It just looks like you're firing confetti at them.
Mm. It's interesting. We'll be talking about that lots when it comes to animation. Because you have to have a feeling of weight to a character. We don't have to. I mean, you pointed out there's games that you can have that have surface level animation. But they never actually really make contact. You just play a particle effect.
What's the feeling you're going for? What's the essential experience? Like Secret World Legends is going for this modern, gritty, high-powered combat. Not having any reaction just feels weird. But if you're going for a much more cartoony style, it would make sense.
Definitely. That does make sense. So, are we
Yes.
having any questions?
I don't see any questions. Michael, do you have any questions?
Yes. Define pi.
That's not a question.
Radiance.
Yeah. Robert is loving the limbs course so far. That's
excellent. Good. There are more lectures dropping this week on that, so there's more to enjoy. And if you haven't done yet, Robert, share your piece over on the Discord.
Yes.
I'd love to hear what you're coming up with so far.
Michael, define pi isn't a question.
We were talking about pi earlier, now it's in my head.
Yeah, no. I get that. Okay, I got a question for you. How did they get the chocolate chips and cookies without them melting?
They do melt. They then solidify again. Science!
We're educators.
There was your science lesson for the evening.
Had a lecture in computer vision and brain got fried. That sounds very uncomfortable.
Yeah, worked all day, brain fried.
Blah, 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 blah,
and Jan.
Well, I mean, I'm feeling a little bit woozy myself, so I get it. And poor Michael has been rushing around for like 4 days solid, so he's a bit woozy.
I've been tech support in the house for the last 4 days. So if any of you guys are parents and you've got kids that want to play modded Minecraft, yeah.
Don't.
Be prepared to be tech support, because things don't always work as you would expect them to. It took me about 8 hours to set up a server working properly that they could join. And then I had to adjust all their settings because they're used to just playing vanilla. And suddenly they enter the server and it's like 1 frame a second. Like, why is it so laggy? I was like, oh no.
That sounds awful.
Yeah.
Just give them a book.
Give them Lego.
Give them a choose your own adventure book.
Yeah, that would work. But yeah,
If you pick up dirt, turn to paragraph 7. If you pick up a stick, turn to paragraph 9.
put dirt in sister's hair. It said so in the book. Still on Godot Getaway course and love it. I would love to revisit Godot Getaway at some point in the future and make a really polished version with more things. But
that'd be amazing.
It was
It
so
was a
much
lot of
fun
to make.
Yeah, it
And to
really
play.
was.
Yes. And I'm
Yes.
glad you're looking to get more of our courses. Don't worry. I know money's tight for lots of people, myself included. I get it. You know, we're not going to hold it against you. You can't buy everything yet.
Yep.
And whiskey.
I like a good whiskey.
I mean, you could turn Godot Getaway into a bootlegging game.
Oh, that is true. The other thing is, you can like bad whiskey too. It's called Have Some Good Whiskey First.
I don't know. I don't drink. But I know a song about show me the way to the next whiskey bar.
No.
It's not as good as the song I was singing before when Michael asked me to do a sound check.
Whiskey is ridiculously expensive, yes.
Yes.
I've often found it comical when people complain about the price of petrol, and then you're like, this whiskey's like £150 per litre. I ain't filling up my tank with that.
Don't put that in your car.
It wouldn't work.
Yeah. Did Mikey switch to Bose QC3545?
I've had these. Well, I had a silver pair, and Kareen's got those, my partner, and I've got a black pair. So I haven't switched to them recently. I've had them for these ones must be 3-4 years now.
He's been using them as he practices his Bond villain, as you can see from the missiles he's got behind him.
I'm a bit of a Lego nut.
Oh, is that Lego? Oh,
I did
goodness.
the ISS over Christmas with my son. It was awesome. You know me in space.
I do.
I was very tempted the other day. I keep getting adverts. The adverts are almost working for Displate, the metal posters. And I had a look. Oh, have they got any alien stuff? Oh, they have. Nice. But what I'd rather do is I've got some soundboards up on the wall. What I'd rather is get something screen printed onto them rather than hang up objects.
Why don't you
that
get
would
a
reflect.
stencil and metallic spray paint?
I don't want to put paint on them because then it will make the surface more reflective. It would need to be a dye or something along those lines.
What's the difference between dye and a paint?
A paint can can make its own surface basically and end up being reflective, whereas a dye changes the color of the material.
I didn't know that. You're so wise. All right, I think we need to start calling it because we're making less sense.
I checked their headphones.
What?
Yeah, they're 35s.
Okay.
Bye.
Very confused there. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining us. Well,
see you next week.
Bye.
Where's the button?
Push it. Push the